you still remember, yesterday we discussed the purpose of this act, and also we did check the in-depth on how businesses are actually expected to follow this act. So now today we're actually going to start checking the in-depth on where the act says no to. So meaning these are the demerits of the act. So the first one, failing to implement affirmative action to meet broad-based Black economic responsibilities. If you still remember, the major aim of establishing this act was to make sure that Black people also are not disadvantaged as compared to white people. So meaning Black people also should be given chances to exercise the skills that they have. We even discussed the pillars like management control, that most Black people should be given that chance to occupy managerial positions. And we also discussed the issue of ownership, where we actually discussed and said that Black people also should be given that chance also to own the property or the assets. And we also discussed the issue of skill development, saying that even Black people also should be given that chance to enhance the level of skills that they do have. Okay, right. So now, also this act says no to promoting unsuitable people into management positions at the expense of qualified individuals. So meaning this act says that regardless whether a person is Black, as long as a person doesn't have proper requirements to perform a certain task or particular job, that person shouldn't be given any chance to exercise his skills. Why? Because he doesn't meet the required prerequisites. So now moving on to another aspect. Moving on to another aspect. Okay, moving on to another aspect, this act says no to refusing to award tenders to Black suppliers who are BBEE compliant. Meaning the moment the suppliers, members or registered with Black economic empowerment, they should be given that chance also to supply other businesses with stock, or to supply other businesses with the inputs so as to generate their own goods and services. If you still remember, we said that one of the pillars, which is enterprise and supply development, we said that Black people also should be given that platform as well to sell goods and services to other businesses, instead of only being the consumers or buyers of goods and services. Okay, thank you very much. You can actually go beyond this and visit different resources so as to enhance your understanding. Okay, right. So now moving to another aspect, we are going to discuss the penalties of non-compliance. What would be the danger if businesses fail to comply with the broad-based Black economic empowerment? So now a question can or might appear saying outline penalties for non-compliance with the broad-based Black economic empowerment, or it can actually say explain penalties for non-compliance with the broad-based Black economic empowerment, or it can say discuss penalties for non-compliance with the broad-based Black economic empowerment. So now it do depend which action verb the question will actually carry. But regardless of the action verb, if you know the content, I think it is going to be very easy for you to attempt that. Okay, right. So now moving on, we are saying that businesses may face imprisonment for non-compliance and fronting practices. So now if businesses fail to apply the aspects that this act, that's exhibit, aspects here that we are referring to the pillars. So now if the business is failing to follow those pillars that the act is looking forward to, for businesses to follow, then there will be a charge for that. And a charge will be an extreme charge because it is saying that the owner of the business or the supervisors or in that particular business or whoever is in charge will actually face some charges towards going behind bars if they fail to comply with this act. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we're saying that there can actually be a penalty. So the penalty could be a fine of up to 10% of the company's annual turnover. So now, meaning if the business fails to comply with this act, this will be a charge where there will be a penalty of what? Of a fine up to 10% of the annual turnover or the profits. Okay, so moving on to an aspect, government will cancel any contract awarded that was based on false information regarding broad-based Black economic empowerment status. So in that regard, if businesses provide with false data, so the government will evaluate the submitted data by businesses, and it will also carry or undertake its investigation so as to check if the provided information or data is valid for that regard or for that matter. So, okay, right. So moving on to another aspect, we are saying that a business can be banned from participating in government contracts for a period of 10 years, meaning if a business is associated with the flow of goods where the government also has a part to play, then in that regard, the business will actually be banned, meaning it will be sanctioned, it will be excluded. That's what the point actually addressed. And that exclusion or that sanction would take a period of 10 years. Only after the elapse of 10 years period, then the business will commence with its dealings. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, business licenses may not be renewed or authorizations may not be issued. Remember, each and every business, in order to carry its own operation, it should be legit. Legit in the sense that it should be registered with the Department of Trade. So now remember, there is a routine of businesses renewing their own contracts. So now if the business violates this act, it means that it will be now very difficult for that particular business to renew its license. Why? Because now there's a charge. They fail to comply by the act. Okay, thank you. Now moving on to another aspect, we are going to check ways at which businesses can comply with the broad-based Black economic empowerment, meaning this is what the act says yes to. This is the expectations of the act, meaning this is what businesses are expected to follow. It's binding, it's a must for businesses to follow this kind of the aspects. So now a question might come and say, recommend ways in which businesses can comply with the broad-based Black economic empowerment, or the question might come saying, suggest ways in which business or businesses can comply with the broad-based Black economic empowerment. So regardless of any action verb that has been or that can actually be used in a question, as a person, you should always understand the content of the act. because the moment you understand the content of the act, to interpret any set of question under discussion, it's going to be very, very simple. Okay, right. So now the first point, where or ways in which business can comply with the broad-based Black economic empowerment, goes as follows. Businesses must appoint Black people in managerial positions, and this is actually been cited by management control as one of the pillars of broad-based Black economic empowerment. So now businesses are expected to follow that pillar. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, businesses must sell shares to Black employees or Black people. As I have said earlier, or in previous lessons, that these acts were actually drafted after the ANC came into power in 1994. So now before the year 1994, when ANC grabbed the power, life was not actually good towards Black people. Black people were somehow very disadvantaged towards or in terms of a different set of issues. So now the issues can also involve buying of shares. So Black people, chances of buying shares before or during the apartheid era wasn't very, very, very easy. But now after the revision of these acts, now Black people should also be given that platform if they afford as well to buy any particular ownership of a business. So remember, whenever we talk of shares, we refer to a portion of business ownership that a person can actually own. Right. So moving on to another aspect, businesses should send Black people for Black skill development training, or in short, Black people also should take part in terms of development training. So now remember, skill development is one of the pillars of broad-based Black economic empowerment, and as a pillar, most businesses are expected to follow this pillar. Why follow this pillar? Because the lifestyle or the standard of living for Black people also should go to the next advanced level. It shouldn't remain on the same level. Why? Because they were mostly disadvantaged, because this platform, before this platform of ANC granted. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are actually saying that outsource the service to Black economic empowerment compliance suppliers. So we already discussed this one in depth. So now moving on to another aspect, businesses must implement affirmative action when making appointments. When making appointments, they shouldn't only concentrate on a certain individual or on a certain group of people, so on a certain ethnicity group like whites and also coloreds. They should also encounter or cater for Black people in the same manner. Okay, moving on to another aspect. So now this act says that businesses should always develop small businesses or small micro medium enterprises through what? Through enterprise and supply development. So now, okay, thanks. We remember these pillars. I did stress them a lot whenever I was discussing with the pillars and the implication towards the business operation. Okay, right. So now we are done with broad-based Black economic empowerment. Now we are going to move on to what we call National Credit Act. So National Credit Act is the act that says or aim at making sure that each and every individual who does qualify to have a credit should always be granted that credit, regardless of age, regardless of culture, regardless of language, regardless of gender, and the likes. So now this act says that each and every person who's seeking for a loan, as long as they qualify to take that particular loan, as long as they have documents in hand that can allow them to access that loan, loan should actually be granted to them, unlike when they don't qualify or the credit worthiness is totally out of line. But if the credit worthiness is still online, then businesses are actually been given that platform to offer or to grant out loan to such individuals. Okay, right. So now we are going to check different aspects, just like in other acts. So remember, we are actually going to check the purpose. Why is this act actually being designed? Which purpose does it serve? And also we are going to check the impacts of this act on businesses as well as employees. How is this act affecting the operation of the business? How is this act affecting the productivity of the employees? So now the affection here or the impact here, we are going to check both positive impact as well as negative impact. And also we are going to check ways at which businesses can comply with this act. And also we are going to check discriminatory actions that can be taken by this act if businesses do fail to follow. And we are also going to check the penalties. What can be the charge if businesses fail to follow or fail to comply with this act? Okay, right. So now let's check out the purpose of this act. The question might come saying outline the purpose of National Credit Act, or the question might actually appear and say describe the purpose of National Credit Act, or the question might say explain the purpose of National Credit Act, or the question lastly can actually say discuss the purpose of the National Credit Act. Remember, regardless of any action verb that can be used in a play, you should be in a position to understand the in-depth of the act, to understand how the act normally operates. Okay, right. So now taking the first purpose, we are saying that the purpose that National Credit Act does serve is that it promotes a fair but competitive credit market. So in short, what it says is that whoever can afford to take credit, this act gives them that particular platform to go and apply for that credit as long as the requirements are met. Okay, right. So now moving to the second purpose, we are saying that this act makes provisions for the establishment of the National Credit Regulator. So remember, National Credit Regulator is the one that will make sure that it regulates the flow of credit from the service provider, which is the business, towards the receiver, which is the customer or consumer. So now a National Credit Regulator will be the middleman between that to make sure that businesses do follow the guidelines of this act. Also, the credit seekers also must have the information pertaining to how they must do so as to end up having credit inside their own hands or pockets. Okay, right. Moving on to another purpose, we are saying that this act promotes the social and financial interest of consumers. Financial interest there that we are actually referring to, we are checking the financial status of a person. The interest that we are referring to the taste. And also, as a person, we do have different tastes in terms of credit levels. And also, whenever we take credits, we should always be in a position to see to it that we do qualify before we even go and bother the service providers or credit providers. As individuals, check if now when I have actually been brought before the bureau, and now you know that you are blacklisted. Why should you have to go there and waste the time? Because it will just be the waste of time, because already your financial status, or already your credibility is affected. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect or another purpose, this act does ensure that consumers know what is included in their credit contracts. So meaning this act advises consumers to first read the contracts. They must read the contracts. So some of us, especially most of people, if not all, they normally ask, where do I sign upon receiving the document? Before you can even ask, where do I sign? After receiving the document, make sure that you go through the document clause by clause, so that wherever you don't understand or wherever you think the clause is not clear, you can refer to those who drafted the contract and seek for clarity. That's what the act says. Don't just ask, where do I sign, before even going through the provided document. Okay, right. So now, this act also ensures that registrations of credit bureau and debt cancelling services, ensure registrations of credit bureau and debt cancelling services. So it means that they can monitor the performance of debt counselors. How do they approach the debtors, or how do they approach those who owe the business? So now, meaning debtors, or these debt counselors in this regard will work with what? Will work with a National Credit Act. So meaning National Credit Act will give them guidance on how to approach those debtors or people who do owe the business. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect. We are saying that this act prevents discrimination and ensure credit is available to all customers. Remember, discrimination can be very broad, but in this regard, or in this context, the discrimination that we are referring to sidelining people in terms of the color of their skin, sidelining people in terms of their age, sidelining people in terms of their culture, sidelining people in terms of their religion, sidelining people in terms of their gender. So now this act says no to that. So now, meaning now, as long as a customer, a consumer thus made the requirements, let it be. Let that particular consumer also receive money as a credit. Okay, right. So now we are going to move on to the impact of National Credit Act. Remember, each and every aspect does have pros and cons. So now we are going to check the danger as well as the positivity of, or the goods or the merits of this act towards business operations on daily basis. So now we are going to start with the positive impact. So now the question might come and say, explain the positive impact of the National Credit Act on businesses. Also, a question can say, evaluate the positive impact of the National Credit Act on businesses. Sometimes a question can just come and say, discuss the impacts of National Credit Act on businesses. If the question says, discuss the impacts of National Credit Act on businesses, the expectation is that you must take into account for discussion both positive impact as well as negative impact, because some of the questions, they are not clear. But other questions, straightforward, can say, explain the positive impact of the National Credit Act on or towards businesses. So now let's check how this National Credit Act can impact businesses in a positive manner. Let's check how this is very good towards the operation of a business. Okay, right. So now we are saying that this act lower bad debts, resulting in better cash flow. Remember bad debts. Bad debts, we refer to those debtors. Remember a debtor, we refer to a person who does owe the business. So now a bad debt or a debtor that can be classified as someone bad, it's a debtor who is taking long to settle his or her own what, or her own credit. So now we end up saying this particular person is a bad debt. Why? Because now he or she is failing to pay, or she is taking long to settle the credit. So this act shows that to have a larger number of bad debts, it is not going to be possible. Meaning this act, it is going to help the business to maintain the bad debt levels that they are going to write off. Meaning if the business was supposed to write off maybe 10 bad debts, now in this regard, it can only maybe write off 2 or 3. Why? Because now the consumers are aware of the act and they know what is expected of them, even though not majority of consumers are aware of how this act, how these acts normally operate. But they do know that whenever they take a loan from any financial supplier or any financial provider, what would be the implications and what would be the results as well. So now the cash flow here, we are referring to cash flow. Remember, we check the flow of cash either inside the business or outside the business. And cash flow can take 2 forms. It can be the cash inflow, and also it can be the cash outflow. So now in this regard, cash flow, it does cater for both cash inflow and the cash outflow. The cash inflow, it acts towards our revenues or acts towards our incomes, while cash outflow acts towards our expenses or expenditures. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that this act protects businesses against non-paying consumers. Remember, in above point, we discussed that this act lower the volume of bad debts that the business was going to write off. So meaning here, it is somehow protecting businesses against these consumers or buyers of goods and services, or these credit seekers, to make sure that they settle whatsoever the amount that they took from the business or whatsoever they owe the business. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that one of the positive impacts is that authorized credit providers may attract more customers. Because now if you're a credit provider and you are legit, and in your dealings you are so transparent, in your dealings you are so accountable, you take accountability as well as the responsibility. In that regard, the brand or the image of your business is going to be recognized. And the moment customers do recognize your brand, now the larger volume of them will come to your business to seek credit. Because remember, if one customer is happy with the services or the customer care, they go out there and they normally do word of mouth advertising your business with regard to the service or the care that they received in your business. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that one of the impacts, especially positive, is that this act leads to more customers through credit sales, as they are now protected from abuse. From abuse, how? How can businesses abuse customers? Businesses can abuse customers in what? In higher interest rate. You may find that a customer can take money or take a loan from any credit provider. But now the interest that should come back with the principal amount that the customer took from the credit provider is very high. So meaning this act does protect customers or does protect consumers or does protect those who are borrowing by doing what? By making sure that businesses that provide with credit does give a reasonable interest rate charge. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect. This act prevents reckless lending and prevents businesses from bankruptcy. What it says is that some of the businesses that fail to comply to this act, they end up giving out credits or loans to consumers who are not even credit worthiness, to consumers who don't even qualify to have that certain credit. Hence why now this point says that the act prevents reckless lending and prevents businesses from bankruptcy. Why are we saying this? Because now, according to this act, before a business can grant out any credit or any loan to any customer or to any consumer, they first have to check the background of that particular person in terms of the level of credit. Is this a paying customer or not? Because some customers, if you don't check the level of their credit worthiness, you may find that they will never ever pay your business. And the moment they don't pay your business, say maybe it's not only one customer, there are a lot of customers at the bank. At the end of the day, your business will fail to make enough profits. And the moment your business fails to make enough profits, that will call for insolvency or shutdown or bankruptcy of your businesses. Okay, right. So now moving on to another impact. We are saying this positive impact towards businesses is that National Credit Act increases cash sales as credit can only be granted to qualifying customers. So now this one I've been stressing it. Qualifying here, we check the credit worthiness and also the needed documents should be into place. So in that regard, a customer can be granted or given a credit. Okay, right. So now we are going to check also the bad side of this National Credit Act. As I said earlier, each and every aspect has pros and cons. So in the same manner, this act, it does have bad side as well. It can affect the operation of the business on daily basis in a harsh way or bad manner. Okay, right. So now the first negative impact is that businesses can no longer carry out credit marketing. Businesses can no longer carry out credit marketing. Meaning it is now, this act somehow, it prevents businesses to market, to go out there to promote their brands and then make customers aware that they give out loans. Okay, right. Businesses struggle to get credit such as bank loans or overdrafts. Remember, to get a loan is not easy, as well as to withdraw more than what you have inside the bank. Overdrafts is only withdrawing more than what you have inside your bank account. That is why overdrafts can be considered as one of the liabilities. Okay. Loan. Remember, to access loan, it is a process. You can only access loan if you have a good transactions with the bank. Not when money comes inside your bank account, you always go to the bank and then withdraw all of it. So in that regard, your transactions in terms of the relationship between you as the consumer or the borrower and the bank is going to be bad. Hence why you see a lot of people fail to do what? Fail to receive loans from banks due to bad transactions. So now if you want a loan, first of all, you can just draft or give yourself time, do planning, give yourself at least a period of 4 months before you go to the bank to seek out a loan. Make sure that within that period of 4 months, your transactions are very, very right. When the relationship with the bank is very, very right. Make sure that whenever money comes into your bank, you don't go to the bank the very same day to withdraw that money. Because now, if you do that, the bank will see that, oh, this person, whenever money comes inside the bank, the money can even finish 2 or 3 hours. So in that regard, for a bank to give you a loan is going to be a challenge. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect. We are saying that one bad side of this act also can be that businesses that do not comply with the National Credit Act may face legal action. Legal action, remember, the Department of Labor, in most cases, does deploy the labor inspectors to different set of businesses according to the claim. And those inspectors, when they get to your business, they will come with compliance form. Then they will check or investigate the complaints from your employees or the complaints from the customers. And then they'll actually give you the guidelines to be followed. So now as a business, if you fail to follow such guidelines, that will be acting towards non-compliance. And if the business now doesn't comply, these are labor inspectors who go back to the office and report that a certain business doesn't comply due to certain reasons. Also, some businesses, they fail to comply without any reason. So in that regard, then the Department of Labor will just pass the matter to court, straight to court. So now remember, when you go to court as a business, owners of the business should be in court. Supervisors from the business should be in court. CEO from the business should be in court. So now let's check the time that they'll be wasting in court. That time that they will be wasting in court was the time that should have been directed or channeled towards production of goods and services. So meaning now they are going to waste time there. Instead of producing goods and services, they'll be going to court and attending to different set of issues. So that is why it is very apparent, or it is very important, or it is advisable to different set of businesses to always make sure that you comply to each and every law or each and every legislation amongst the 8 that I told you that we are going to put under the discussion. Okay, right. So moving on to another negativity of this act is that debt collection procedures are more complex and expensive. So why are we saying debt collection procedures are more complex and expensive? Remember, as a business, in order to engage in debt collectors, there are a lot of paperwork also that you should go under. And also you should travel there. You are going to waste petrol. You are going to waste time. That is why we are saying it is very expensive. Expensive in terms of time consuming, expensive in terms of costs. So now as a business, if you comply with this act, this can actually be avoided. How can you comply? Don't just issue out credit to consumers or buyers of goods and services when they don't qualify. Make sure that before you issue out such a credit to your consumers, check the background credibility if they do qualify to take a loan. Check if the needed documents are in place, and also check if those particular customers are or were not brought before the credit bureau. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that fewer customers buy on credit as it is more difficult to obtain credit. Yes, as a business, you can't just give credit to each and every customer. First of all, before you issue out credit, check the loyalty of a customer and check the regularity of a customer. Is this customer loyal to you? Is this customer a regular customer? How often do they come to your business to support you? So now if you see that this person frequently or most often come to your business to support you, so in that regard, you see that this can be a loyal and regular customer, then you can offer out credit. Okay, right. So now let's move on to another aspect. This act increases the administration burden on credit providers. So now this administration burden will refer to paperwork. There will be a lot of paperwork because now in a business, those who are working under the administration department, remember here, we can talk of the front office, such as reception, and also in some businesses, the Department of Finance also can form part of administration. So now this act says that if you offer out the credit, there is going to be a lot of paperwork. Remember, whoever will be seeking for credit, they should submit the proper documents needed for them to end up being granted that particular credit. So now it is going to take a lot of work, paperwork, because now filing also should take place there. Filing, either it is electronic filing or it is manual filing, but that one on its own, it is going to take a lot of time, and also it is going to take a lot of money or expensive. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that National Credit Act leads to loss of sales as many customers may no longer qualify to buy on credit. How is it possible for customers no longer qualify to buy on credit? They can only not qualify to buy on credit if they've been brought before the credit bureau. So now if they've been brought before the credit bureau, meaning the chances of them getting loans are very, very slim or totally shut down until the period that the credit bureau gave elapses. Because now also the credit bureau period, it does elapse. If my mind serves me well, it takes a period of at least 5 years, if not at most 5 years. So, but on that one, you can undertake your own research so as to enhance your understanding. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect. We are saying that the paperwork and administrative process required by the Act are costly and time consuming. So now this one, if you still remember, when I was addressing the above bullets, I did touch on paperwork, administrative processes, and then the cost as well as the expensiveness in terms of time. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are going to check the discriminatory actions according to the National Credit Act. So now this is what the Act says no to. All the aspects that we are going to list below, the Act is against such initiatives. So now the question can come in different phrases. The question can come in a different use of action words. So a question can say, discuss the discriminatory actions according to National Credit Act. Or the question can say, suggest the discriminatory actions according to National Credit Act. Or the question might say, recommend the discriminatory actions according to the Act. So now below are the National Credit Act discriminatory actions. These are the actions that the Act says no to. Okay, right. So now this Act says no to businesses refusing credit to customers based on gender. If you still remember, in above slides, we did discuss discrimination, and we said that this Act does hate or it doesn't cater for any form of discrimination, whether discrimination can be based on price or any type of discrimination. So now it is now apparent that the Act says that don't say you don't give out a certain loan to this gender, a female, or I don't give a certain loan to male because male people are well known of not paying, or female people are well known of not paying, or a race. So now this Act, regardless of the color of your skin, if you do qualify to have or to access a certain loan, you meet all the prerequisites or you meet all the requirements, let it be also access loan. So businesses that just give out loan to their own desired race or to their own desired gender, then they'll be liable to some certain charges. So now as we proceed, or as we get to the level of compliance, that's when we shall discuss such. Okay, right. So now moving on to another action. This Act says no to businesses upon charging different interest rates to customers based on gender or race. Yes, I know most businesses, they do have a tendency of checking the welfare of the consumers. Yes, it is right to check the welfare of consumers. Why should you have to check the welfare of consumers? So that you can know the status of the customers that you do have. But it doesn't necessarily mean that after or upon receiving the information based on what, on the status of your customers, then you end up charging them different interest rates. No, it shouldn't be like that. Don't say this is a male, I charge this particular interest because this is a male and he has a lot of money. Or this is a female, this female is well known of having a lot of money. Then the interest that I'm going to charge from this one is going to be a bit higher than the normal interest rate that you normally charge towards your customers. So now this Act says no to that. Let it be uniform. Let it be common across all your customers. If you give your customers at the interest rate of 10%, let it be, unless otherwise, because there can be changes. That is why I'm actually saying unless otherwise. But discrimination in terms of gender and race is totally prohibited according to this National Credit Act. So right, so now moving to another aspect or another action. Businesses shouldn't do the following: blacklisting customers without making efforts to recover the debt. Yeah, some members of different businesses, they are somehow reluctant in terms of recovering their debts. You find that they did have the time frame of their debtors to come and settle whatsoever they owe in their business. So after the time frame has passed, instead of making follow-ups and calling those customers, they go straight to credit bureau. You find that the moment you go straight to credit bureau, this person was going to pay you. So that is why it is very important or advisable to different set of businesses to first communicate with your customers. Always make sure that you provide with a contingency time period. If your customer says, I'll pay within the period of a week, just give a contingency of additional 2 weeks. So meaning now after the contingency of 2 weeks, and you see that your customers indeed failed to honor their obligations or failed to honor whatsoever they owe in your business, then in that regard, you can just now tie your shoelaces and go straight to credit bureau and claim such. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are going to check the dangers of businesses when they fail to comply with the rules of the game according to National Credit Act. So now the question might come in different set of ways. So now the action verbs, remember I spoke about the action verbs, that action verbs shouldn't change the context of any act. So meaning now, as a learner, you should always be in the position to interpret each and every question regardless of the action verb. If the question says explain, understand what is expected of you. If the question says give the consequences, understand what is expected of you. Because some of the learners, when a question says give the consequences, they just scrutinize that consequence and then they jump onto non-compliance. So now I'll just highlight the meaning of consequence. When a question says give consequence, it means that you must give the negative effect of aspect or any issue under discussion. So meaning here we are going to consider on the negative effect of the what? Of the non-compliance according to National Credit Act. Okay, right. So now let's check the first penalty. Businesses that fail to comply with this act, the first penalty can be they may not demand payment, sue or attack the clients or consumer salaries or assets. If you don't comply with this act as a business, so it means the Department of Labor will never ever be on your side once there are any disputes taking place at your business level. If you still remember, we did discuss different set of disputes when we were discussing what? When we were dealing with Labor Relations Act. And then we did check all the dangers that can come and affect the performance or the productivity of the employees in that particular business. And also we checked what? The performance of the employers or supervisors. Also, they can be affected either in a negative way or positive way. So now remember, if both employees and employers are not working in harmonious terms, that one on its own is going to affect the profit margins of the business. And remember, the success of the business is nothing but profits. If the business is reluctant or is very slow in terms of profits collection, so now the business in that regard is not successful. But you can only say business is successful if it is in a position to manage to collect higher or reasonable profits, or whatsoever the selling price or the revenues are greater than the costs. The selling price or the revenues should be greater than whatsoever the spending that the business did incur. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that one of the charges can be businesses may not charge any fee or interest or other charges under a specific credit agreement. Remember, as a customer, when customers come to your business to take out credit, as a business should first check the credit worthiness of such customer. If you see that a customer does meet the requirements, you don't just give out the loan. Don't just say, give me your bank account, you start transferring money. No, you don't do that. What you must do, there should be a contract, credit contract. So in that credit contract, it will be showing the agreement between the service or credit provider and the consumer or the buyer of goods and services. Okay, right. So now moving on to another penalty. We are saying that the court may declare the granting of credit by the business reckless and may order consumers not to repay the credit or part thereof of the business. Yo, this is very painful. So imagine if you are a credit provider in your business and you did grant someone 100,000 or 1 million, and then your business is not legit. Your business is not complying also with this National Credit Act. And then now when the customer is failing to pay you, go to court to try to sue the customer. The labor department says, no, this customer is not going to pay anything that he or she owes from your business. Why? Because of the failure of legitimacy or failure to comply with the act. Remember, each and every business is expected here in South Africa to register with all of these 8 acts. Remember, I told you that these acts are not only limited to 8. We have, the list is so endless. It's just that now the Department of Education does allow us only to touch on these 8 acts, not to go beyond such stipulated scope. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are saying that the National Credit Regulator may impose a fine or penalty on the business for non-compliance. Remember, this fine or penalty, it can also be what imprisonment. If the business failed to comply, the owner of that particular business or the supervisor or the CEO will end up being behind the bars. That is why it is very important or advisable to each and every business to make sure that they comply with each and every act. Right. So now moving on to another aspect, the business will bear all costs of removing the negative information of clients or consumers who were blacklisted as a result of reckless lending. So now this one of reckless lending, remember we have been discussing it. It comes most often. Why? Because this act prevents or it says no to each and every business or each and every credit provider to just issue out credit before you check the credit worthiness of a person. Check if this person doesn't disappear, because some people, they do have the tendency of taking loans. After taking loans, they don't even bother. They just say, I'm waiting for me to be blacklisted by the credit bureau. And then after that, I'll serve a period of 5 years. And I know after the period of 5 years, my credit is going to be erased. Then I'll start again from scratch to apply for another loan. And if you check, most people who are into such initiative are customers who normally take huge sum of money, and they know that after taking huge sum of money, then they can go for the period of 5 years still consuming or using that particular money. And once the money has been exhausted, or once they have finished the money, then they'll go again back, and they know that their names has been erased at the credit bureau. So now, as businesses, to avoid such time wasting initiatives or such time wasting approaches, businesses should always make sure that they comply and follow all the guidelines that have been put onto the table for discussion by this National Credit Act. Okay, right. So now we are going to check ways in which businesses can comply with the National Credit Act. These are the aspects that the National Credit Act says yes to, meaning each and every business is expected to follow these guidelines. So now, grade 12s, what you must bear in mind is that, as I said earlier, action verbs, make sure that you take into account the use of action verbs, because now some of you, whenever you come across an action verb that you don't know what it means, you end up losing the whole content. You end up answering another question, not the question under the discussion. So now, in this regard, a question can say, suggest ways in which businesses can comply with the National Credit Act, or a question might actually say, recommend ways in which businesses can comply with the National Credit Act. And if you still remember, I said these are the do's that National Credit Act is expecting each and every business to practice. Okay, right. So now the first do is that Businesses should offer applicants pre-agreement statements. Pre-agreement statements, meaning this pre-agreement statement, it should be the agreement before the customer signs the credit agreement. First, check if the customer does have the willingness to take a loan. So now, if you check that the customer does have that willingness to take a loan, then you can go to now a real credit agreement. Because some customers, they failed at the step of pre-agreement. Pre-agreement, they totally fail. So now, if customers fail at the stage of pre-agreement, so there's no need for you as a business to even move towards the stage of contract agreement. Okay, right. So now moving on, we are going to also discuss what? Discuss this below bullet or below way. So now businesses should disclose all the costs of loan. No hidden costs should be charged or added. So meaning, as I said earlier, or in previous lessons, businesses should always apply King's Code principles. King's Code principles, they are very easy. A King's Code is only saying that each and every business should always make sure that they account for their actions. There should be accountability, and also there should be responsibility, and as well as transparency. So meaning now businesses are expected to be transparent to their customers. Don't just have the hidden costs. Don't just increase the interest that your customers are going to pay together with the principal amount that they took. No, make sure that each and every information pertaining to a loan, you make it readily available to each and every customer. So now what I have seen, most businesses that are engaged in these credit services, they normally display all the guidelines that customers should follow on their walls. So the moment you get inside the business premises and then you check or you just throw your eyes on walls, you will see that there is an agreement or there are some set of guidelines where the consumer or the customer should always familiarize themselves with. Okay, right. So now another aspect, this act says that businesses should first obtain credit records or checks of clients before granting loans. Why are we saying that? Remember, we said it earlier that some of these clients, you find that they are bad payers. And when as a business, you don't know. And these people are bad payers at a small scales. So imagine if they come to your business to seek such huge amount. Will they even going to be able to pay it back? Totally not. That is why it is very important for businesses to always make sure that they do credit checks before issuing out any form of credit to the consumers. Okay, right. So now, this act also says that businesses should be registered with the National Credit Regulator. Because if a business is registered with the National Credit Regulator, if there can be any challenge pertaining to the flow of credits from the business towards the customer or consumer, then this National Credit Regulator can chip in and help them to solve such problem without a business incurring into a lot of expenditures in terms of time consuming, expenditures in terms of monetary values or monetary spending. Okay, right. So now, this act also says that businesses should always submit an annual compliance report to the National Credit Regulator. Meaning annual here, we refer to 12 months. After each and every 12 months, businesses that are registered with this act, they are expected to give the report to National Credit Regulator on how they have been issuing out credits and how many people are still owing and how many people have settled their obligations or their debts up to that far. Okay, right. So now moving on to another aspect, we are going to have what? We are going to have the following. Many businesses should conduct affordability assessment to ensure that the consumer has the ability to meet his or her own obligations. Why is this so important? Because if you check some customers, they can just go to the bank and then request for a huge sum of loan or sum of money, of which at the end of the day, when you check the particular amount or the type of salary that they earn each and every month, it doesn't allow them to keep at par with the payment. Hence why it is very important to first check the salary of someone who is seeking for a credit. If this person is not what this, if this person is an individual, then check the amount of the salary. Also remember, businesses can also apply for credit as well. Check the flow of profits in that particular business before you can even grant out the loan, because some businesses, you find that they're operating on loss. So, but now they take a loan, and after taking a loan, since there are no profits that they are collecting, at the end of the day, they end up defaulting. And the moment they default, it means that a business or the credit provider is going to incur a loss. And at the end of the day, the credit provider business might shut down. So that is why it is very important for businesses or service providers to first assess if the customers can pay back whatsoever they want to request in a form of a loan. Okay, right. Businesses should conduct credit check with registered credit bureau and consult with National Credit Register or regulator. So meaning, as a service provider, don't just give out credit. When you do your background check and also when you assess the customer's affordability, make sure that the first office that you approach or the first office that you call or the first office that you communicate with is the credit bureau. And then after communicating with the credit bureau, you can also communicate with National Credit Register to check if proper procedures have been followed. Okay, right. So now moving on, businesses must have procedures in place to comply with the provision of the Financial Intelligence Center Act. So now the procedures here, we refer to the guidelines that businesses should always follow before they issue out a loan. Don't just issue out a loan. There should be a guideline. And those clauses, check from guide A or guide 1 up until the last guide. Don't miss other guides, because the moment you miss other guides, you end up messing up, because now you find that whoever came to your business to take a credit, you end up not paying. Why? Because when you did miss one of the clauses under the guidelines and that consumers should meet so as to be granted any form of loan. Okay. We are going to check the consumer. We are going to check the rights of consumers according to the National Credit Act. Remember, these rights of the consumers, there are many. Even though there are many, we are only going to check or take a few of them. But a few of them that we are going to discuss, it doesn't necessarily mean that those rights are limited to the ones that we are going to put on the table for discussion. These rights are many. If we write them on the boards, maybe we can even demand or use 100 boards. Hopefully, I'm not exaggerating. Okay, so now I'll just give a highlight of the rights that we'll be discussing in in the next lesson. At this juncture, I'll stop here, and then in the next lesson, that's when we are actually going to discuss in depth the rights of the consumer according to this act. So now, a question might come and say, outline the rights of consumers according to the National Credit Act, or a question might come and say, discuss the rights of consumers according to National Credit Act, or the question might come and say, recommend the rights of consumers according to the National Credit Act. Remember, as a consumer or as buyers of goods and services, we have a right to quality, product quality. If you are not certain or you are not happy with any product quality, you have a right not to buy that product. So now, business owners or sellers or whoever is involved in that particular business shouldn't even fight you and say, but why did you touch this product when knowing that when you are looking for a certain quality? No, that is your right. You can only pay for the product of the desired quality. And also, consumers do have a right to confidential information. If a consumer leaves their confidential information, that information or those informations shouldn't be shared amongst the staff members, or they shouldn't be shared among other consumers or customers. So the moment a business does that, then customers have rights to take such business to different set of courts. So that is why it is very important for businesses to always make sure that they accommodate the rights of the consumers. Okay, at this juncture, I would like to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your consideration. May God bless you. Shalom. Let's meet in the next lesson. Oh, ha. Hadibokwe.